Okay, this is the second part of a lecture on this handout called Playing Monopoly. All about the entrepreneurs of the Gilded Age and how they made great wealth and what business practices they adopted. We left off talking about George Pullman and the company Town. We're going to pick up now with looking at John D. Rockefeller and how he made money in the Gilded Age. He did a couple things that were important. One is called trusts and price fixing. Okay, a trust is when companies in the same industry band together and then they drop prices and they drive out their competition. This would be like if, let's say that gas companies could do this, or we've been working with fast food, so let's just stay with that. So let's say that McDonald's and Burger King were major competitors with each other, and McDonald's wanted to get the leg up. Well, they are major competitors with each other, so that's not so hard to figure out, but they want to get the leg up. So let's say that McDonald's gets together with Hardee's and any other fast food restaurants that serve burgers, and they decide to band together and drop their price of hamburgers to 25 cents. Not the dollar menu, 25 cents. Well, of course, hardly anybody would shop at Burger King anymore. Burger King would be offering their hamburgers at the typical rate, and they just wouldn't be able to compete. Well, as a result, in time, Burger King would be driven out of business, and then we would just have McDonald's and Hardee's left over. And while they would have lost money all through that time period when they were driving Burger King out of existence, now that they are going to have a monopoly over the burger industry, they might decide to raise the price of their hamburger to $3. Now, that would be the way they're going to recoup all of their money and therefore become profitable beyond belief. Now, this is kind of common if you think about like the consolidation of the airline industry right now. We're seeing something like that where we're getting fewer and fewer airlines. The idea being that once you have just a few, there's less competition in the marketplace and prices will necessarily go up. And so that was an idea that Rockefeller used to his advantage, that he would drive other companies out of business and then drop his price by dropping his prices. And then once they were out of business, he could raise his prices artificially high. And that would more than make up for the profits he had sacrificed in that time period. Another thing he did was called railroad kickbacks, where he would go to the railroads and know that they were desperate for his business because he was transporting a lot of oil on railroads, and he would tell them that he would use them, and but they had to give him a little bit of a kickback back on the rates that he was paying to use the railroads. And they would be willing to do this because he was just transporting so much oil. They were desperate for that level of business. But then they would pass that cost on to farmers. And so that's part of why farmers are going to be really upset in this time period about how John D. Rockefeller seems to get one rate charged to transport things on the railroads and how common people tend to get another rate charged to carry things on the railroads. So those were two ways in which he made his Standard Oil Company extremely profitable. Vanderbilt is going to be another famous monopolist in this time period, and he's going to consolidate the railroads. Actually, his contribution is kind of important. What he does is he buys up all the different railroad companies, and as he buys them, he standardizes the width of the rail and the distance between the two rails. And so his railroads become a lot more profitable because they're connective. They actually connect with each other. And once he's got enough railroads that do this, all the other railroads that are of different sizes or gauge width, they become less used, and he's able to buy them at an even lower price. So this is what we call horizontal integration, okay? Where you drive out your competitors and buy them up to create one huge monopoly. So this is what would happen if McDonald's, say, bought up all its competitors, bought up Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, Arby's, Taco Bell, and then controlled the whole fast food industry. That would be horizontal integration, okay? And that's what Vanderbilt did. Of course, his son, maybe his grandson actually, is the one who then was able to build the Biltmore House in Asheville. That's why it's called the Biltmore House. And it just kind of showcases the fabulous wealth that the Vanderbilt House demonstrates the fabulous wealth that the Vanderbilt family amassed as a result of this horizontal consolidation that he used in the railroads. Okay? We also have a local entrepreneur who made great money as a result of something I call advertising and label leveraging. And this came about as a result of his farm existing during the Gilded Age, during the Civil War. So let me tell you this story. This is kind of funny. It has to do with the Duke family. So James Duke and his sons, they are working in this little farm in Durham during the Civil War, and they're growing this new or relatively unknown type of tobacco called Brightleaf. And when the Yankee soldiers come through, Sherman's March, remember, came through Raleigh, when they get to the Duke homestead, they steal some of that tobacco, and it's very mild, and they like it a lot. And they get back up north, and they're kind of wishing that they had more of it. And they start writing down to this area to ask if anyone knows where they could get more of that tobacco. Well, that's when James B. Duke realizes, hey, I've got a pretty good product here. I should maybe, me and my sons should perhaps put more of our effort into developing this type of tobacco. So they get very innovative, and later on will create the whole cigarette making machines and those kinds of things. But the first thing they do is create a label for their product, and it's called Bull Durham. And they have a bull symbol and a whole graphics marketing campaign where they put this logo and they start advertising their label on coasters and billboards and leaflets and all those kinds of things, creating great recognition for their brand and a lot of demand for it. And so people would start going to stores and saying, hey, do you have any of that Bull Durham mild tobacco? Do y'all sell this? And therefore the roadside stands and stuff who sold tobacco were very anxious to get some of this in stock because there was a lot of demand for it. That's when James Duke would go into the establishment and say, hey, you want some Bull Durham tobacco? And they'd all say, yeah, there's lots of people coming in asking for that. They're crazy about the stuff. He'd say, great, I'll let you sell it in this venue, but only if you don't sell any of these other tobaccos. So it's kind of like if Coke went into Food Line and said, hey, you want to sell Coca-Cola here? And Food Line would say, oh yeah, we love Coca-Cola. We definitely want to sell it. They'd say, great, well, you can't sell Pepsi. Okay, it's a way of creating demand for your brand and then using that demand to leverage out the other brands and make sure that they aren't available. Okay, so that's how James B. Duke got a lot of recognition of his brand, and therefore develops this Bull Durham brand, and then advertises it, creates demand, and then wouldn't let brands be sold if his was sold there. So that's where, I don't know if you've ever heard of this movie called Bull Durham, but that's where the Durham Bulls athletic team comes from, and the ballpark, the Durham Bulls athletic park. All that is related to that. Also, they get so wealthy that by 1929, the Duke family would like to buy a college, because, you know, the Vanderbilts did that. The Vanderbilts created Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, so suddenly it's and Carnegie Mellon had been established up in the Midwest, and so it becomes a really cool thing for these entrepreneurs to start their own college. James B. Duke, ever budget-minded, he just bought a college called Trinity College, and he buys it and renames it Duke, and it becomes today's Duke University as a result of that. And around 1929, that's when Duke University came about. So all the cool guys were starting their own universities in the time period. Okay? Alrighty. Now, there becomes a lot of debate about these men and whether their contributions to society have been mainly heroic or have been mainly evil. The people who see their contributions as heroic tend to call them captains of industry and see a lot in them that is worthy of praise and admiration. One particular kind of storyline that's written during this time period is by an author. His name is Horatio Alger, and he writes all these kind of little books that are all kind of have the same themes to them that glorify people like Andrew Carnegie and James Duke and Cornelius Vanderbilt. And basically talk about these rags to riches tales of young men who are very hardworking and have great character, and that leads to their success and fabulous wealth. And the idea is that they're entirely deserving of that wealth. It contributes to this philosophy called social Darwinism. And social Darwinism is the idea that the reason why some men succeed and some men don't has to do with their kind of innate abilities to adapt to their environment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. So Charles Darwin, in the late 1800s, developed this survival of the species, survival of the fittest idea that if you look at animals, the ones that adapt best to their environment are the ones who are going to succeed, and that's just part of the natural cycle of life. Well, they start applying this natural selection idea to social interaction. And the idea is that there's just some people in the world who better adapt to their environment. They have strength of character, motivation, fortitude. They think creatively. They work hard. They just are fitter. They survive and adapt to their environment better than others. And that's natural. That's what God wants to happen. And therefore, any wealth that they get as a result of that is entirely deserved and entirely proper. The flip side of social Darwinism is that if you are not succeeding, if you are not wealthy, if you are not flourishing, there's something wrong with you that you need to fix, that you're not adapting to your environment, you're lazy, you lack motivation, it kind of comes to blame the poor for their poverty, and it's really something up to them. It's some flaw in them that is either innate or something that they can fix but have failed to do so. And so that's the social Darwinist principle. What goes along with social Darwinism is that this is part of nature, and therefore it shouldn't be messed with. And the government shouldn't get involved in that process. And if they do, that it's actually almost ungodly to do so, that this is nature playing its way out. The other philosophy about these men is that they're evil, and they call them robber barons. That they've used unethical practices to squash out their competition and overcharge the people, and therefore that there's something evil that's been at work here that has allowed them to kind of step on the necks of other people, and that actually the government has a role in stopping this. That the government should come in and stop the evil robber barons from consolidating wealth and stepping on the necks of their workers and driving prices up and gouging the consumer, and that therefore there's a role of government there to do that. So, the time period of the Gilded Age is one of a lot of intrigue, because you have the wealthy gilded businessmen against the little common man. Now, there's a modern application of this, and that is, take Bill Gates, for example, okay? And this goes along with modern political philosophy as well, okay? If you're a conservative, a Republican, you tend to really think that the wealthy deserve to keep their wealth, that they've been innovative, and therefore should be rewarded. So you take Bill Gates. Hey, he works his way through school. He puts at least 10,000 more of hours into computer programming. He takes the risk to drop out of Harvard and help establish the Microsoft operating system that makes computers connective with each other and helps bring about a computer revolution in America. And some people say, Bill Gates, awesome, heroic, captain of industry. He deserves all of our praise, and he should keep his wealth. It's his, and he deserves it. There's another group of people, modern-day liberals, Democrats, who would instead emphasize the not-so-attractive elements of the Bill Gates story. For example, that he actually had a very privileged upbringing, that his parents could afford to send him to good schools and provide him with the equipment that he needed to tinker on the computer, and that he had a privileged upbringing, and that he actually stole some of the ideas for his operating system from Apple. That Apple was the first company who'd come up with a desktop and a mouse and icons, and that he really just ripped that off of Apple and then made it open source for people to create applications that would talk to his operating system, and that's how he gained wealth, is mainly by stealing. And then later, when he doesn't see, he did not at first, Bill Gates at first did not really buy into the internet. He thought the internet was kind of this wacky idea that wasn't going to take off. And so he kind of missed the internet revolution. And when he finally realized his error, he started the first internet, the internet carriers were things like Netscape Communicator. When you went on the internet, you would click on a Netscape icon. Well, when he started to realize that he'd missed out on the internet revolution, he created his own internet carrier called Internet Explorer. And now he had to figure out a way to leverage his operating system to allow